Hello and welcome to Skepticus. I am your boy, Adam Abnola, and today we are going to dive into some viewer feedback. Specifically, we're going to talk about what happens when you have deconstructed or are somewhere along that deconstruction path and your spouse has not followed you along that path. We will also cover what will I say to God when I find myself in front of him and I have to choose to go to hell or submit. And finally, we're going to do just a little bit of house cleaning with regard to some general questions and overall gripery that I've gotten from some people here on the channel. So stick with me. The first question that we're going over comes today from one of my new members. So if you have ever thought of supporting a channel like this, please do consider that. You don't have to do that in order to get answers from me. And if you are a member, it's not like I'm going to make standalone videos for every one of your questions. But this member put this comment / question / advice request in one of our membership threads this morning. And I really thought that this was a very interesting question and it required a deeper answer. So that's why I wanted to put it in this video. So let's dive into that first. This person says, I really love your work. I was a biblical literalist from 1994 until about a year ago. My beliefs changed over time due to some critical thinking and primarily by letting love and empathy guide me. I still believe in a universal consciousness that we can call God, which would be more like Spinoza's than any of those other concepts of God. However, I no longer identify that consciousness with the Christian God or the gods of any other major religion. While I go to a very progressive church that believes in science, medicine, supports the LGBTQ plus community. Some of our ministers actually are LGBTQ plus members and does not teach biblical literalism. I still feel like I can't be honest with my wife because I don't believe that she can handle life without the concept of the sky daddy, as you called it. Do you have any advice on how to manage this? The church really is a good group of progressive people, so maybe I should just play along. Now, I know that this channel doesn't normally come to mind when you think of advice channels or advice columns, but I still thought that this really exposed some major questions about theism and deconstruction, etc. So that's why I wanted to dive into this. So there's multiple layers to get into here. First of all, of course, again, thank you for being a member. So that's not the only reason that I'm replying to this, but I really do appreciate your support. Aside from that, I also want to give this person credit for having escaped the indoctrination that is biblical literalism, fundamentalism, evangelicism, etc., etc. And I mean that sincerely. I know that on this channel, I take a number of shots at Christians in general, but especially at fundamentalists, literalists, because I find their positions to be the most ridiculous. When I identified myself as a Christian for 40 years, I was never a literalist. And I find the whole enterprise of biblical literalism to be intellectually bankrupt. But I will be the first one to admit that it's easy to throw stones. It's also easy to forget that almost anyone can have almost any ridiculous ideas when they were indoctrinated into those systems. When we get out of those systems, if we're lucky enough, of course, those platforms and those ideas come to look ridiculous to us. Even though I was never a literalist, when I deconstructed, although I never had that term, but when I deconstructed, a lot of the ideas that I held previously, like the virgin birth, suddenly sounded patently absurd. And you don't have to be stupid to hold those ideas. You just have to be indoctrinated. So despite my snark at times, it's easy for anyone in the right circumstances, or I guess I should say in the wrong circumstances, to find themselves going down that mental rabbit hole and embracing ridiculous ideas in the broader service of some religion. So kudos to you for getting out of that. And I do mean that sincerely. I also love what you put here because I think that as atheists or agnostics or anyone who's just generally pulled themselves out of this biblical literalism, even if you're still religious on some level, we tend to think that we did it all the power of our rational mind. And you do mention critical thinking. Certainly that can help. In some cases, it may be the entire reason that somebody deconstructed. But I love that you said some critical thinking and primarily by letting love and empathy guide me. I don't think we talk about that enough as atheists, agnostics, non-Christians, etc. Sure, critical thinking helps, but it's rare that someone pulls themselves out of a system of indoctrination like fundamentalism purely based on critical thinking. If we're honest with ourselves, and I don't have any empirical numbers to back this up, but I think that more often than not, any critical thinking that rescues us from that pit is accompanied by at least some degree of love and empathy. Because it's one thing to say, well, I think that the earth is 6,000 years old, which doesn't make any logical sense, but okay, fine. Believe whatever fairy tales you want to believe. But then when you want to believe that someone is going to hell purely because they were born only being attracted to someone of the same sex, that's not just illogical. That's a cruel and unloving doctrine. And anyone who embraces that is willingly or unconsciously embracing hatred at the same time. Now, they'll tell you that they're not. They'll claim all day that they love our gay brothers and sisters. Bullshit. It's codified hate. That's all it is. So a lot of times it takes more than just critical thinking to get us out of these ruts. So again, kudos to you on this. But of course, the meat of this comment really comes down to your wife, and specifically your relationship with your wife. To read this one more time, it says, I still feel like I can't be honest with my wife because I don't believe that she can handle life without the concept of the sky daddy, as you called it. So a couple things I have to lay out here. I'm on wife number 3 right now, so I might be the last person you ever want to ask for marital advice. Even putting aside that joke, which isn't really a joke because it's true, but even putting that aside, let me be very, very clear on this. I have no counseling credentials. I have no kind of education in mental health or managing relationships or any of that. So if you really want to get good advice, professional advice on how to handle sticky issues regarding any aspect of your marriage, then I encourage you to seek out counseling, to seek professional help. And I don't mean professional help like it has to be a psychiatrist who's going to medicate you. I mean people who are actually trained and know how to counsel couples, or even if you go individually, because I cannot give you anything like that. Obviously, this is all going to be anecdotal. If you're still with me and we can get past those disclaimers, I do feel like I have some insight on this because one of my ex-wives was, in fact, a fairly fundamentalist Christian. And this drove a wedge between us. Now, to be clear, there were other issues in our relationship. And I'm sure that even if we were in lockstep with regard to religious ideas, we would probably still be divorced today. I don't want to overplay that. But the religious stuff didn't help. I remember very clearly one day after we were married, and my bad, we hadn't really talked about some of this stuff deeply. And then I realized that she didn't think that dinosaurs existed at all, that they were some tool of Satan to lead us astray. And I was stunned. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. Now, I was at that time still a practicing, identifying Christian. But like I said earlier, I have never been a fundamentalist. And even in my most Christian of times, I never thought that dinosaurs were fake, a tool of Satan. I was never stupid enough to think that dinosaurs lived alongside humans. I was never silly enough to believe that the earth was 6,000 or 7,000 or 8,000 years old. So when I learned this about her after we were already married, it was uncomfortable. And it's easy to sit here and throw darts at this, like, oh, my stupid ex fundamentalist wife who had these crazy ideas. But I mean, really, you could turn this around. You could look at it from the perspective of someone who is fundamentalist, and they could be saying, oh my gosh, I just realized that my husband believes in the fallacy of dinosaurs, or they believe that this lie that the earth is billions of years old. And it would be just as distressing for someone on the other side of that fence as it would be for someone who doesn't hold these fundamentalist views. So I guess all this is to say that I do think this is actually a serious issue for your marriage. I didn't say it's a critical killing issue. I didn't say that it should split you apart. I hope that never happens. But I do think it would be a mistake to just gloss over this, because sooner or later, if your wife is devout, if she really has concerns about your soul or your spiritual beliefs, this could become a fissure that widens over time. And I wouldn't want that to happen for you. So a few thoughts here. One is that you say, I don't believe that she can handle life without the concept of the sky daddy, as you called it. So why would she have to handle life without that concept? Meaning, you can be a non-Christian and be married to a Christian, and you can have a healthy, loving, lifelong relationship. I'm not going to say that it doesn't possibly present a few sticking points, but ultimately, you don't have to have the exact same spiritual beliefs in order to be happily married. Now, I know that for some fundamentalists, especially, they do not adhere much to that at all. In other words, amongst evangelicals and fundamentalists, often they take it so far as to say that it's unhealthy and even unbiblical to be yoked to someone who does not believe exactly the same way that they do. But it sounds like you're going to a pretty open-minded, liberal kind of church anyway. So I'm going to assume that your wife is not this hardcore evangelical fundamentalist kind of person. It sounds like she has reasonable views if she is enjoying her time in this church. And if that is the case, I don't know, but I would hope that it wouldn't be some kind of death knell for your relationship if she were to find out that you no longer consider yourself to be Christian. I think that would be especially so when, as you put it, it sounds like you like your church. It sounds like you're not against the idea of still going to church, and that might help her to feel like you haven't abandoned her. I bring this up because I have heard of other atheists and agnostics and non-Christians who still attend church, often with their spouse, often with their kids. Sometimes it's for unity with the family, but also sometimes it's because they enjoy it. They get community there. They enjoy the music. They can even sometimes enjoy the sermons, even if they don't believe in all of the doctrine or dogma that's being preached from the pulpit. So if you're truly open to still going to church, and I'm not saying that you have to be, but if you are, and if she's already in this mindset where if she likes this type of church, I don't think she's going to be horribly upset that you don't have the exact same religion, then why is it that she would even have to consider life without the concept of the sky daddy? She can still believe in her religious beliefs, and you can have your Spinoza-esque kind of beliefs, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a big problem between you two. I do realize that for some couples, it's distressing if you don't think that your partner is going to heaven or going to the same version of heaven that you are or praying to the same God that you are. So I'm not sure if that's what you're implying with this question, but it doesn't have to be any kind of my way or the highway kind of statement. You can have your beliefs, especially if you're willing to take part in her tradition still, and she can have her beliefs. And I wouldn't think that has to be a major issue. Now, again, with the caveat that I am not a marriage counselor, I will say that the deeper issue that comes through in your comments is this. Even if you think that your wife would be unhappy with this, why would you not still want to talk to her about it? If you think it's important to her, and on some level it's important to you because of the comments that you're putting here, why wouldn't you want to have that open discussion? Now, I know that the obvious answer is that maybe she would be unhappy or maybe it would be an uncomfortable conversation. But a healthy marriage isn't based on the absolute avoidance of unhappiness or uncomfortable conversations. In fact, I would argue that even in the most blissful of marriages, if it's going to work at some points, every once in a while, you've got to have an uncomfortable, maybe borderline unhappy conversation. The strength of your relationship is not based upon you never having these conversations. It's based upon you being able to have these conversations and get through them as loving, caring partners. The last thing I'm going to say on this is in regards to your last sentence, your last question, where you asked, the church really is a good group of progressive people, so maybe I should just, quote, play along, unquote. Whether we're talking about the other members of the church or whether we're talking about your wife in particular, I'm not a big fan of just playing along. I'm not saying that you have to confront someone and make a big deal out of it, but there's a difference between, well, I haven't really made an issue of this yet versus I'm just going to play along. Just playing along, when done for long enough, has a certain stench to it that sounds kind of like being in the agnostic or non-Christian closet. And I think it can feel disingenuous for you and disingenuous for the people around you if all you're doing is playing along. You may think that you have everyone fooled, and maybe you do, I don't know. But sometimes it's surprising how much other people pick up on. And if you're just honest with them about your beliefs, it doesn't necessarily have to cause problems. I'll give you an example of this. I've said this in other videos. If I go over to your house for dinner and you want to pray before the meal, I'll pray with you. I'll hold hands. I'll bow my head. Hell, I'll even say the prayer if you want me to. It's not because I believe in the Christian God or in any God for that matter, but I don't have to believe in these things in order to participate in the ritual. But what I will not do is tell you in my most heartfelt way possible that I actually believe this stuff. I won't lie to you about my beliefs. I will, within reason, take part in your traditions, and they could be religious, they could be secular. Maybe you want me to take my shoes off at the door. That's not necessarily a religious tradition, but whether it's religious or not, I will respect it. If you want to pray before dinner, I will respect it. I mean, hell, if you wanted to have a moment where we bow to Mecca, I mean, as long as you don't expect me to go through this long ritual of chanting stuff from the Quran, if you're a good enough friend of mine, I would probably humor you on this for a little while. But I would never tell you that I'm a Muslim or that I believe in Allah or any other God. And I would never tell you that anything coming out of my mouth feels in any way to me as a real prayer. In other words, I will respect your traditions within reason, and I will do everything I can to make sure that we are all as comfortable as possible in each other's company, but I won't lie to you about what I believe. And I think if you go down that path, it can eventually, over time, get toxic. When two people start to have very different beliefs about religion, it can be problematic. But I think that in most cases, especially if you already have a healthy relationship, it doesn't need to be toxic. How would you like to be one of my advisors? I'm using Skepticus's memberships as a way to allow you to have a voice in the content and the direction of this channel. I hope to see you in the membership pool, and I want to hear your voice in what Skepticus is doing going forward. The next question did not come from one of my members, but it was on one of my God-free Bible study videos. And this person says, I have a question for you, Adam. You said God is evil because he rigged the game and did whatever he wanted to us. But I ask you, what if after your death you end up before God? What would you say to him? Would you accept eternal hell rather than submit? God created us and we are his creatures. He can do anything he wants to us, and there is nothing we can do about it. We have no control over our lives, and we can't predict what will happen to us. And if God is not the truth, then what is the truth? Our lives are meaningless. Okay. Yeah. Let's unpack this one. I mean, I get a lot of comments like this, but there was just enough in here that felt patently illogical and borderline trolling, although I don't think this person thinks that they are, that I just thought I want to dive into this one here in this video. So their first question in this comment overall is, but I ask you, what if after your death you end up before God? What would you say to him? Well, first of all, I'd be pretty damn surprised to even be conscious after my so-called death. Second of all, if I actually had an opportunity to talk to him and have some kind of conversation, I'd probably have an endless stream of questions for why does he just choose to do all this horrible, evil shit all over the world if he is this supposed omnipotent being, omniscient, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, blah, 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 all the omnis. I don't imagine that conversation would go very far now, do you? But then it says, would you accept eternal hell rather than submit? I was a Christian for 40 years, my man. And I don't know how your church teachings go, but everything I learned was that I wouldn't be given a chance at the pearly gates to go to hell or submit. I was always under the impression that that decision is made by you before you die. Now, I have heard there are different interpretations, especially with Catholicism. Some people believe there's atonement. Some readings of Revelation imply that there will be a time when you can kind of burn away the sins somehow and maybe get your past back into heaven. But I have never heard it put like this. Like, oh, I'm going to die after spewing all of my atheist hatred all over YouTube, but somehow still I will get to the pearly gates and then I will be told I will either accept eternal hell or I will submit. If you believe that, that's great, but those were never the teachings I was given in the Christian church. Furthermore, if I was actually given that choice, if I was standing before God or the angels in the afterlife and they said, here, you can go burn in eternal hell or you can submit. Yeah, I'm sure at that point I would submit because that's not any kind of acknowledgement of the glory of God. That is responding to a threat. It's no different than if someone came up and put a gun against my head right now and said, you will get on your knees and pray or you will have your brains blown out. You know what I do? I get on my knees and try to do the best job I could of showing that I was praying. Would I believe it? Would I think that God is listening to me? No, because I think if God were actually watching over me, he wouldn't let me get in that situation in the first place. But because I don't actually want to be burning in eternal conscious torment for all time, and you gave me this incredibly coercive binary deal, I guess I would take the submission. Although first, I would ask, isn't there a third option? Can't I just go away? Does it have to be a binary choice? Do I have to burn in your hell or submit for the rest of eternity? Because I think that they're both miserable in their own way. And I don't think heaven is any place I would ever want to be for eternity. I've talked about this in other videos. Would I like to live longer, whether that's in the afterlife or now? Sure. If I could get 10 more years of relatively healthy life, I would take it. If I could get 100 more years of relatively healthy life, I'd take it. I would probably take 500 or 1,000 more. But if you said to me, here's your option, you can go away like annihilationism, or you can be eternal. You can live for all eternity. I would never, ever, ever accept that option of living for eternity if I had an option to just go away. Because I think that people who fantasize about this eternal heaven haven't thought too deeply about what it would mean to truly live forever. It might be happy, it might be glorious for 100 years or 1,000 years, or maybe even 1,000,000 years, but that isn't even a pin drop in the vast sea of eternity. Eventually, it would become miserable. Eventually, you'd be praying to that divine creator every day for annihilation. It may take 1,000,000 years, it may take 1,000,000,000 years, but eventually you would be the picture of misery. But the idea, this arrogant idea, like, well, when you're in front of God and you're dead, are you going to kneel down and pray to that man? Or like, that is the sickest, lamest dodge that any Christian ever gives, because that is not a choice. That is being browbeaten, coerced into this idea. And even then, it's silly to think you're going to take an atheist and give them this choice, because going back again to my teachings in the church, I never believed or never was told that you could fake your way into heaven. So you can say, will you go to eternal hell or will you submit? But all the time that I submit, I'm going to be thinking to myself, this is bullshit. This is a horrible afterlife, and this is a petty and disgusting God. And if I'm thinking that, don't you think your God would know that? In other words, wouldn't this whole silly binary choice be an absolute waste? It's nothing but a Christian jerk off to make you feel good about this idea that I'm going to hell and you're not. That's all it really comes down to. Then this person slides into the most ridiculous of Christian immorality. God created us and we are his creatures. He can do anything he wants to us and there is nothing we can do about it. I mean, if your God exists and he is truly omnipotent, you're right. So it's not going to matter what I do, because an evil God, and according to your own text, he's evil as hell. So an evil God is going to do with us what he wants to do anyway. Now, I can try to lick his boots for a while and smooch his backside. And maybe if he's not truly omnipotent and he doesn't actually know what I'm thinking, maybe I can fool him for a while, which would be a really sad statement on your God. But eventually, he's going to know that I think his evil acts are, evil, because they are. And saying he can do with us what he wants, that doesn't make it any less evil. In fact, that makes it more evil. It's disgusting. And then the end of this just really devolves into insanity in my mind. We have no control over our lives and we can't predict what will happen to us. Yeah, so. And if God is not the truth, then what is the truth? Anything else that's true? I mean, there's a whole world of truth out there. Dude, just go look around. Exercise your brain a little bit, because you don't have to assume that the only truth I can ever get must come from God. There are other answers. Buck up, little camper. Go find them. And this idea that our lives are meaningless, that just shows such sadness on your part. Now, to be fair, there are people who need to derive their meaning from outside themselves, and there are people who derive their meaning more from inside themselves. I make no qualms about the fact that I really derive my meaning from me. I'm not saying that I am all the meaning in my life. I'm saying that I find the meaning in my life, and it is a lot of meaning. It is a rich and happy life. If yours is not rich and happy and you think the only thing that could make it happy is God, I think that's a sad statement on you. But even then, fine, go search for your God. Go get on your knees and submit to this evil demon lord if that's what makes you happy. But the idea that nobody could have meaning in their life, that our lives are meaningless, and if God is not the truth, then what is the truth? I can't even begin to tell you how small-minded that is. And I don't care how arrogant this sounds, how condescending this sounds. I pity you. That's really sad. So we're going to close with just a little bit of housekeeping here about comments in general. I've noticed a few trends that come up in my comment section, and these aren't going to go away. Most people won't even see this video, but I will address those trends here for whatever it's worth. First, I've had numerous people say to me, I was trying to put comments on your video and they keep disappearing. Are you blocking me or shadow banning me or what have you? I have never removed a single comment from any of my videos, nor do I plan to. I guess maybe, I don't know. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I have never removed anyone else's comments. That doesn't mean there haven't been comments that have disappeared from my videos. Let me explain this for everyone who doesn't know already. There are several layers of censorship, I guess you'd have to call it, on YouTube. One layer I control, and that is I can just go in and remove your comment, or I can block you as a user. Haven't ever done either one of those. I haven't blocked a single user. I haven't removed a single comment. There's also a filter that I can put on my videos that will by default either remove or hold your comments just if they have certain words in them. I have not put any words in that filter. It's possible that that filter might have some default words in it. Like if you put the F word in a comment, I'm not sure if it would be automatically removed by my filter or not. I would have to look at that. But it's not some conscious thing where I'm going through trying to remove comments. I don't care if you want to disagree with me, if you want to fight with me or fight with other people. I mean, don't, because it's a dick move. But I have better things to do all day. You know what I mean? Like, really. But they could be caught by that filter. But here's the important thing that I did not even know until I started running this channel. YouTube has this filter up here, like this filter above everything that I have no control over. And YouTube will strip comments out with no input for me whatsoever. And believe me, they will even strip out my comments on my own videos because I've had it happen to me. And if you think that it's some obvious thing like, oh, you said a swear word or you said some racial hatred and that's what YouTube stops. No, I'm not even sure sometimes why they remove some of the comments that they remove. It has something to do with general topic and content. For example, I did a video where I was talking about the Christian responses to genocide and how they justify this in the Bible. And I couldn't even reply to some of the people that were putting comments because no matter how I worded it, without any input on my part, YouTube would remove my own comments, even though I wasn't swearing, I wasn't threatening, I wasn't doing anything that I think a normal person would consider to be censorable activity. And yet I'd put the comment up and it posts, it doesn't tell you anything's wrong. And then you go look at it 5 minutes later and it's gone. Now, there is one other type of censorship, you could say, that I have used on some occasions, not often. I guess you call it, I don't know, like a shadow ban. YouTube calls it hide user from channel. If I take a user and hide them from the channel, it doesn't block them from seeing any of my videos. It doesn't block them from reading the comments of others. It doesn't block them from adding their own comments. What it does do is nobody else will ever see their comments again. I won't see them. The other users won't see them, etc. And the only time that I've ever used that is when people like start attacking me or they get really attacking of others in the comments, like if it's just getting to be very uncivil. And I have used that a handful of times. Now, I have had some people who kept getting their comments stripped by YouTube. They asked me if I was taking away their comments or blocking their comments. I said, no, I'm not doing that. I've never done it. And I explained what happens. And then they went back in the comments and accused me again of blocking their comments. So that's when I hid them from the channel. Because if you can't be grown ass enough to stop accusing me of something I haven't done, and even if I was, you couldn't prove it, then I'm not going to sit there and let you spew your ridiculous lies all over the channel, even if it is just the comment section. I've done that to, I think, a half dozen people. That's it. But if you really want to know what doesn't get you banned, but gets you ignored summarily by me and pretty much everyone else in the comments. It's when you can't even be bothered to engage with the content of the video. People get on there all the time and they start throwing these ridiculous statements that have nothing to do with what I said in the video. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what you want me to do with this. You'll ask questions, but they have nothing to do with what was talked about in the video. Or even worse, they'll ask questions that were addressed directly in the video. Now, you may not have agreed with my positions. You may think that there was something wrong about what I said, but if you can't actually be intelligent and grown-ass enough to actually say in the comments specifically what it is that you did not like about my commentary, then I am under no obligation whatsoever to answer you in any meaningful way. Some people have gotten pissed off because I will just put laugh emojis under their worthless comments. I love that. I don't care what you think about it. If I'm putting just laugh emojis under your comments, it's because you can't be bothered to engage intelligently with the content, or more often than not, you're just being what I would call a Christian troll. If your whole feedback on a video is to plop Bible verses into the comments, you're being a Christian troll. If some people are trying to have some semblance of legitimate conversation in the comments, and then you have to chime in and say, this is an apostasy, this guy is the devil, he's misleading you, you need to find Christ, you're being a Christian troll. If you can't tell me what's wrong with the video, but you're just obviously butthurt about the video itself, you're being a Christian troll, or at least a troll of some flavor. And I couldn't care less if you want to then tell me that I'm being immature or that I ran away from your glorious debate. That's fine, dude. You just rail away. I couldn't care less, dude. I have better things to do. I have more content to make. More content that will piss you off. All right, ladies, gentlemen, Joe, that's all I have for today. I'm glad that you're here with me. I hope to see you again. If I have in any way misrepresented the divine, he, she, they are always welcome to chime in. But they never do they? No, they don't. Thank you for being here. I hope to see you on future videos. But until I do, lo, I say unto you, stay skeptical.